The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Longman Simplified English Series. Read by Suriya Thongmak. Chapter 6. In the Graveyard. At 9:30 that night, Tom and Sid were sent to bed as usual. They said their prayers and Sid was soon asleep. Tom lay awake and waited in restless impatience. The clock struck 11. Then there came Huck's signal, the meowing of a cat. A minute later, Tom was dressed and out of the window. He crept along the roof of the woodshed, and then jumped to the ground. Huckleberry Finn was there, with his dead cat. The boys moved off and disappeared in the darkness. Half an hour later, they were stepping through the tall grass of the graveyard. It was on a hill about a mile and a half from the village. A faint wind moaned through the trees, and Tom feared that it might be the spirits of the dead complaining about this disturbance of their rest. The boys talked in whispers. For the time and the place, the solemnity and the silence had depressing effect on them. They found the heap of newly dug earth which they were seeking and trapped within the protection of three great trees that grew within a few feet of the grave. Then they waited in silence for what seemed a long time. The mournful cry of a distant bird was the only sound that troubled the dead stillness. "Huck, do you believe the dead people like us to be here?" said Tom, in a whisper. "I wish I knew," whispered Huck. "It's awfully solemn, isn't it?" "It is." There was a long pause. "I say, Huck, do you think Horace Williams can hear us talking?" "Of course he can. At least his spirit can." Another long pause followed. "I wish I said Mr. Williams," breathed Tom. "But I never meant any harm. Everybody calls him Horace. You should be very careful how you talk about these dead people, Tom." This was discouraging, and conversation died again. Suddenly, Tom seized Huck's arm and exclaimed, "Shh!" "What is it, Tom?" The two boys held on each other, their hearts beating fast. "Shh! There it is again." "Didn't you hear it?" "Oh, Tom, they're coming! They're coming!" "What'll we do?" "I don't know." "Do you think they'll see us?" "Oh, Tom, they can't see in the dark, just like cats. I wish I hadn't come." The boys bent their heads together and scarcely breathed. A dull sound of voices floated up from the far end of the graveyard. "Look there," whispered Tom. "What is it?" "It's devil fire." "Oh, Tom, this is awful." Some vague figures approached through the gloom, swinging an old-fashioned lamp. "It's the devils, I'm sure." "Three of them, Tom. We'll never get away alive. Can you pray?" "I'll try, but don't be afraid. They're not going to hurt us." "Shh! What is it, Huck?" "The human beings. One of them is. I'm certain that's old Potter's voice." "No, it isn't it?" "I know it. Don't stir. He isn't sharp enough to notice us." "Drunk as usual, I expect. All right, I'll keep still. Here they come again. I say, Huck, I know another of them. It's Redskin Joe." "That's all. That murdering half-breed. I'd rather have devils." "What do you want?" The three men reached the grave and stood within a few feet of the boy's hiding place. "Here it is," said the third voice, and the owner of it held the lamp up and revealed the face of young Dr. Robinson. Porter and Redskin Joe had a handcart, from which they took a blanket, a rope, and 2 spades. Then they began to open the grave. "Hurry, men," said the doctor in a low voice. "The moon may come out at any moment." They made an indistinct reply and went on digging. For some time there was no noise but the sound of the spades moving the earth. Finally a spade struck the coffin, and within another minute or two the men had lifted it out. They broke off the lid with their spades, got out the body, and dropped it roughly on the ground. The moon sailed out from behind the clouds and lit up the chalky face. The handcart was got ready, and the body was placed on it, covered with a blanket, and bound in its place with the rope. Peter took out a knife, cut the end of the rope, and then said, "Now the cursed thing's ready, Sawbones," and Joe handed out another $5, or here it states. "That's the way to talk," said Redskin Joe. "What does this mean?" asked the doctor. "You demanded your pay in advance." "And I've paid you." "Yes." "You've done more than that," said Redskin Joe. "Approaching the doctor 5 years ago, you drove me away from your father's kitchen one night, when I come to ask for a bit of bread, and you called me a scoundrel, when I swore that I'll make you suffer for that. Even if it took me 100 years, your father had me put in prison as a vagabond. Did you think that I, with native blood in me, would forget such treatment? And now I've got you, and you must pay for it." He was threatening the doctor with his fist in his face by this time. The doctor struck out suddenly and knocked the villain down. Potter dropped his knife and exclaimed, "Here, don't strike my partner." The next moment Potter and the doctor were fighting fiercely. Redskin Joe sprang to his feet, his eyes flaming with fury, snatched up Potter's knife, and went tripping like a cat about the struggling man, seeking for an opportunity. Suddenly the doctor tore himself free, seized the heavy headboard of William's grave, and stunned Potter with it. At the same instant, the half-breed saw his chance and drove the knife up to the handle in the young man's breast. He struggled and fell partly upon Peter, flooding him with his blood. At the same moment the clouds covered up the dreadful spectacle, and the two terrified boys seized the opportunity to creep away in the darkness. When the moon came up again, Redskin Joe was standing over the two men, regarding them thoughtfully. The doctor murmured something, gave a long gasp or two, and was still. The half-breed muttered, "That account is settled, Casu." Then he rubbed the body. After doing so, he put the fatal knife in Potter's right hand and sat down on the broken coffin. 3, 4, 5 minutes passed, and then Potter began to stir and moan. His hand closed upon the knife. He raised it, glanced at it, and let it fall with a shiver. Then he sat up, pushing the body from him, and gazed at it and around him confusedly. His eyes met Redskin Joe's. Good heavens! What's this, Joe? He said. It's a nasty business, replied Redskin Joe, without moving. What did you do it for? I didn't do it. Potter trembled and went white. I thought I wasn't drunk. I shouldn't have touched any drink tonight, but it's in my head yet. I can't remember anything about this. Tell me, Joe, truthfully, now, old fellow, did I do it, Joe? Upon my soul and honor, I swear that I never meant to. Joe, tell me how it happened, Joe. Oh, it's awful. And he was such a fine young doctor. Why? You two were struggling, and he hit you with the headboard and knocked you down. Then you got up, snatched the knife and stuck it into him just as he hit you again. And you've been laying here till now. Oh, I didn't know what I was doing. It was all on account of the drink and excitement, I'm sure. I never used a weapon in my life before, Joe. The poor creature dropped on his knees and held out his arms before the murderer. Joe, don't tell. Say that you won't tell. Joe, that's a good fellow. I've always liked you. Joe, I defended you too. You won't tell, will you, Joe? No, you've always been good to me, Potter, and I'll keep my mouth shut. Oh, Joe, you're an angel. I'll bless you for this till my dying day. He began to try. Come now, that's enough for that, said Redskin. You go that way, and I'll go this. Move now, and don't leave any tracks behind you. Potter hurried away, and the half-breed stood looking after him. If he's as much stunned with the blow and as stupid with the drink as he seems to be, Redskin Joe muttered, he won't think of the knife till he's gone so far that he'll be afraid to come back for it. The coward.